Okay, so today we're going to be talking about steep turns at the student or private pilot level. So, basically, the description of a steep turn is 2 or more 360-degree turns to the right, to the left. So we're going to be coming this way, and through this way, rolling out here, and then coming around here. So, the purpose of a steep turn, is going to be to maintain coordination and smoothness when in these turns, using trim, pitch, bank as necessary in order to maintain these. So, in order to set up for a steep turn, we are going to need to perform our before landing checklist. This is to enhance safety and make sure that in case of an emergency, we're ready for it. And the next thing we do is perform 2 about 90-degree clearing turns. This is going to be to the left initially and then to the right. We're going to be looking out for traffic, other obstacles that might be in the way, and any terrain that could be interfering with this in order to make sure we have a safe maneuver. So, alrighty, so for the standards of the private pilot ACS, the student must not exceed plus or minus 100 feet of their initial altitude, plus or minus 10 knots throughout the maneuver, and plus or minus 5 degrees of bank. So, we also need to make sure that we do not go more than 10 degrees off of our initial heading. All right, so we know the standards, we know the purpose, we know what to do before we set up. Now, the actual maneuver itself. All right, so once we got the standards down, we're gonna go ahead and pick an altitude and make sure we have a tailwind. So we get that tailwind and we're gonna have to go ahead and pick a visual reference point outside the cockpit, because the whole time we need to make sure we're looking inside and outside the cockpit during this maneuver. So once you're at your desired location for this maneuver, you are going to go ahead and trim your airplane as necessary. And before starting the maneuver, it's important to understand that you are going to be trading vertical component of lift for the horizontal component of lift. So this is going to be changing. So this is going to require changing pitch, changing your trim as necessary, and adding a little power to increase that airspeed. So you're going to have the most back pressure right here at this level of the turn, and then rolling out here is where you're going to have your least back pressure. All right, so the actual process as a whole is going to be picking reference point outside, establishing a tailwind, and adjusting your trim as necessary. Because you can pull back as hard as you want on the elevator, but trim is your friend. Trim is going to help you throughout this maneuver to maintain that altitude. And you're going to go ahead and bank. 45 degrees is the private pilot level, so you're going to go ahead and start that turn to the right, increasing back pressure as you come out in the turn. And we are going to want to roll out on our entry heading at this point. So we're going to relieve our back pressure on our yoke here and start rolling out your turn about half the degrees of bank that you're putting in. So 45 degrees here, I'd say around 20 degrees, start rolling out on your turn, and that's gonna pretty much guarantee that we roll out on our entry heading right here. And in order to make sure that you're doing this correct, you're gonna want to feel that wake turbulence of your turn in here. So you're gonna roll out of that turn, and right when you roll out of that turn, if you're not on your entry heading, you want to go ahead and establish that immediately. And remember, you have plus or minus 10 degrees of your initial heading. So I like to stay in 5. So you're going to go ahead and immediately start that turn to the left. Now, as we are rolling out of our turn, we know that we're going to do the same exact process to the left. So going back to the process, after we're banking 45, adjusting trim, they need to roll out, as mentioned, about starting the rollout about half the degrees of bank, and then immediately starting that turn to the right. So here I wrote turning to the right, but this is where you would be turning to the left. Also, it's very important to start your cruise checklist once you're done with your maneuver. Several common errors that students may have with this, and this is really important to remember so that you don't forget whenever you perform these maneuvers. So initially, you obviously know we got to do the before landing checklist. A lot of people fail to remember this, believe it or not. And so the checklist, and also forgetting to do those 90-degree clearing turns. This is improper setup. So failure to do clearing turns. Sometimes before a maneuver you can get really antsy and anxious to go ahead and do it, and you can forget the simple things that are the most important, which is safety. So another thing is using trim as necessary. Like I said, if you wanted to, you really could pull back on that back pressure or push forward as you need, but trim really helps in this maneuver. So another thing is rolling out on wrong heading. And again, you have plus or minus 10 degrees, but if you're turning and you're not banking at the proper angle and correcting for it here, you can really face those consequences when you come right about in here. And when you come out of this turn incorrectly, then you're only setting yourself up for failure for the next one. So making sure that you are maintaining that angle of bank pretty much throughout the whole turn until you come out to this point is very important. And then a lot of students won't remember the fact that you are, like I said, you are having a decrease in the vertical component lift, and you are having an increase in the horizontal component of lift. So you have to adjust for this with airspeed. So failing to add power as necessary. And this will also cause you to lose that altitude. So making sure that you go ahead and do all the proper things before you set up the actual maneuver is really going to help you out in the long run. And again, with that banking, half the degree bank angle rolling out when you're about 20 degrees off from your heading is very good rule of thumb to make sure that you stay there. So overall, steep turns are a great private pilot maneuver. Okay, so a few important things to remember in this kind of maneuver is that there are 4 left turning tendencies of the aircraft. So when we're in these turns, our turn to the right is going to be slightly different than the turn to the left. So a few of the turning tendencies are torque, which is pretty much this concept that
torque is the force that causes an opposite rotation, and because the propeller spins clockwise as viewed from the pilot seat, the airplane is experiencing the opposite force.
There won't be as great of a difference as the left turn will be. So equal and opposite. All right, and then another one is P factor. P factor is pretty much the concept that the ascending blade the descending blade is taking a bigger bite of air than the ascending blade, causing the plane to turn to the left. So for this maneuver specifically, is going to, when we're turning here, we may have to have an increased amount of rudder in relation to the other side. Bigger bite, or a higher angle of attack, to put it into better terms. So another one we have is the gyroscopic precession. Our next one. This is the concept that a force placed on an object is going to be felt 90 degrees the opposite direction, and so that's going to cause the aircraft to turn left when the propeller is spinning. Another one is spiraling slipstream. Here is where your plane is in motion and your propeller is turning to the right, and a flow of air hits the back of that plane and causes it to turn to the left. And so when we're in this right turn and you have the left turning tendencies, you're not going to have to use as much rudder when it comes to the left turning tendencies. And this brings up another thing to remember, that the increase in your bank is going to create that increase in stall speed. So just remembering that the most important thing in this maneuver is to maintain that airspeed so that you don't get yourself into a stall. So that's pretty much it when it comes to seat turns.